Hey, Geoff. Welcome to Wine Slut Podcast. Uh, Geoff, you're a fellow MW. I don't think, a fellow MW on my little podcast yet.
Oh,
Do you
really?
want
I'm
to?
the first?
I
Oh,
think you're the first. Do you
I
want to
feel
tell me
honored.
about? Do you want to tell me about you?
Sure. I'm a master of wine based in the Okanagan. I always like to say you can count on a master of wine to let you know that they're a master of wine too. So it would naturally come up in conversation. But I'm based in the Okanagan. And predominantly what I do is help wineries with direct to consumer sales. So helping them with things like their wine club, online sales, tasting room, and all of that world.
What's your company name?
It's Lithica Wine Marketing.
And do you do that for just wineries in Canada, or do you do it for wineries anywhere?
All over, yeah. So I work with people in the US, in Italy. Italy's a surprisingly big one because there's so many American tourists going to Italy right now. So they're trying to reach out into the DTC space, but kind of everywhere. Like a lot of what I do is just like obviously it can be regionally specific or country specific, but a lot of it's just like good general practices too that can apply quite broadly.
I don't know the answer to this. In Europe, okay, so what we're talking about today is your RP is, and can I just sum it up and say it's on, a kind of best practices for wine club, or retention versus attrition, and what factors attribute to both of those, um, things? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's better than how I would sum it up. So yes.
Okay. Do you know what? I think when you've written something, it's, like, really hard to say what it is sometimes. It's like when people ask me about it was called a dissertation back then. Head of the longest title, it was, like, "Factors Affecting the Decline of Syrah and American Consumers of Yada, Yada, blah, blah, blah." And so other people could just say, it's about Syrah, basically. But it's funny because you passed the MW, what did you pass in 2020?
2020, yeah, right in the middle of COVID.
So your research was in 2019?
It was transactional data that would have spread from memory 2012 to 2018, 2019, something like that.
Okay. And, I guess my question was gonna be, is there a big wine club culture in Europe? Like, you say you're working with Italian wineries, and I know your specialty isn't just, like, dealing with wine clubs, it's really about is it about like, when you specialize in your business, is it about DTC sales and increasing that in tourism?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the short answer is no. Like wine clubs are very foreign to most European wineries. Um, I think with a few exceptions, like there's people who are really targeting, say, like the American market, in which case it makes sense because wine clubs are obviously very familiar to North Americans in general. But for the most part, it's been tough trying to grow wine clubs in Europe because I just think part of it's like a disconnect between wineries and consumers. Like consumers just don't necessarily understand wine clubs in the same way they do in North America. And probably the other thing is like wineries don't understand either because like, why would we do this?
Well, why would they do that? Is this a question that we can
There's so
answer
many great
today?
reasons, because there's been like mixed articles talking about wine clubs recently and the death of the wine club, but still, I think that's kind of a little bit exaggerated in a bit dramatic, frankly, because, wine clubs are really essential for so many like small and medium-sized wineries because it's predictable, regularly occurring revenue. When you have a club shipment coming in, when you're about to have like a boatload of cash that's potentially going to come through into the account, and so you can pay for things like bottling and maybe yourself from time to time, but things like
That would be
bottling and,
nice.
and stuff like
Mhm.
that, which is really important for a lot of wineries.
Yeah, we're going through that right now. We run wine club. So I'll just tell you what we do. This whole podcast is really about me, and me getting free advice from you. We do two wine clubs a year, one or two shipments a year, one in October, right? And another in the spring, which in March. And we do 6 bottles each shipment. Within those shipments, we do 3 wines, but 2 bottles of those wines. And that's because, like, when I'm buying wine, my preference is to always buy 2 bottles of something so that I can drink one immediately and then hold one, kind of see where I think it's going to go and hold one for another time. But so I want to come back to that. But to your point, we run wine club in the fall and it allows us to pay our grape bills. but then it pays our great bills. And by the time January comes around, I mean, we are poor as dirt right now. Like, I'm not taking a paycheck this month. We're eagerly anticipating running Wine Club in March so that we can get back to to normal, because paying great bills after harvest is such a significant expenditure for us that we really rely on. I mean, we might run Wine Club and we make somewhere between 90 and $100,000 just by running Wine Club. So you do that twice a year, and it's significant. But one of those is almost entirely taken up by paying for grapes. So we need that second shipment in order to pay ourselves and bottling costs. So right now, the reason I haven't paid myself this month is because we had 10 grand in glass, 10 grand in bottling costs, and we're just kind of ramping up for this. So it is Wine Club is a necessity for us. I mean, it keeps us afloat, really.
hmm And maybe I should just quickly add, because obviously we've taken it from a winery side, but from a customer side, you talk to, I think a lot of wineries don't appreciate how much people love being part of a wine club. And they don't appreciate like how proud they are of being part of a wine club either. Like they really become, it sounds like a cliche, but it's not, like a brand ambassador. Like people in your club will tell other people like, oh, we're club members here, here, and here. So it's really impactful. And so a lot of times we're like, well, we're doing this because it's really important for cash flow. It's important for revenue, and like all of these really sound reasons from a winery side. But from a consumer side, there's lots of great reasons that they want to be part of a club too. So it's kind of self-serving on both sides.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about that. We had dinner last week, and you were telling me that you felt like the research could use expansion, that it was a little limited because it was 9 wineries in California. And then can you just talk to me about your like using C7 in order to extract data, and how you got all this, how you got your data?
Yeah, so this was all based on transactional data. So I was using a single e-commerce platform, which was Commerce 7. And so basically I had nine wineries based in California to use as my case study. And I think, when we talk about a wine club, there's so many things that go into a club, like the benefits that members get, a lot of more like, let's call it qualitative things that are difficult to quantify. But I was really looking just at transactional data. And I think why that was useful in part was, well, to be honest, just to narrow the scope a little bit, but also because I wanted to look at how things that maybe a lot of wineries overlook, like more structural decisions. So things like, well, the number of shipments per year, the number of SKUs per shipment, and how that potentially impacted things like wine club retention and attrition.
Well, let's dive in. Talk about the things that affect Wine Club retention and attrition. Those are hard words to say next to each
Well,
other.
I think there's like, again, I'll draw in part on my research paper and then part on like anecdotal experience as
Mhm.
well. Like from a research perspective, there was a couple of things that were surprising. Again, keep in mind this is a relatively small case study of 9 wineries, so we don't necessarily want to like jump and apply this to everyone, because like what works for one winery often doesn't work for another. But I would say thing that was surprising was geographical distance from the winery. And so if you think about this, you'd think, well, our club members that are closest to the winery, maybe those will have the highest retention rates because, well, they're close to the winery, they're visiting more often, they're bringing friends and family, and they're, as a result, availing more benefits of being in the club. Well, my research showed that that was actually the opposite. And then again, when you think about it, well, okay, that feels kind of intuitive too. If the person's based in wine country, it probably means they're going to a lot of wineries, and so maybe they're more likely to make a change versus someone who lives on the other side of the country. While they don't have access to your wine, potentially, maybe it's not on retail store shelves outside of being a club member. And so they're getting a benefit in a slightly different way than they would be like going to events and getting free tastings and things like that. So I thought that was one thing that was interesting, which especially has important ramifications in terms of how we engage with our club members. Like a lot of times, especially I think if we think of like a more traditional approach from like 10 or 15 years ago, it was always about like on site, on site, on site. How do we get people on site? And I think that's evolved over the last like 10 or 15 years, in where people now are going more off site. So we're going to key markets. How do we engage with our club members in some of our key markets, major cities? And so I think we see that being increasingly important. It is also a way to not just retain club members, but gain new club members. And I think the other thing is maybe refocusing how we offer some of our club benefits as a result. So
Yeah.
geographical distance was, sorry.
Oh no. I mean, oh no. Go ahead. Finish that thought.
I was going to say geographical distance was one, but that's going to be layered in with things like shipping and discounts. So from a discount perspective, again, very like 10 or 15 years ago, everyone offered a club discount. So if you're a club member, you get 10% off or 15% off. And so my research showed that had a negative effect on retention. I think a
Wait,
negative
a
effect on,
negative effect?
yeah, yeah. So if you offered a discount, you were more likely to have poor retention.
If you offered a discount, wait, people would leave? Like, I know we're using poor retention, like, I understand what that means, but just, like, I just want you to say it. Like, people were more likely to leave your wine club if you offered a discount.
I think so. And again, well, that's what the research showed.
Right.
And I think there's some intuitive reasons to think that too. And I think one is I've seen this in real life in front of my eyes, where you go to a tasting room and a tasting room associate basically says something along these lines, which is, you join the club today. Well, you could get a discount on this purchase and cancel in a month. And I've heard that in those words almost verbatim. So I think part of the thing is if you offer a discount, you potentially are providing the wrong incentives both for your staff in terms of how they sell it, and potentially the wrong incentive for your customers too. So that would be one consideration why I think discounts aren't a big driver. I'm just not a big fan of discounting in general. And I think it's difficult once you roll out a club discount to then roll it back. So if I'm a new winery, I would be like very thoughtful in terms of whether that's a benefit that I want to offer or not.
That speaks to me in such a huge way. We have, he was a really, I'm going to call him out. His name is Josh. He worked for us for a period of time. He was a wine club member and he lived in Minnesota and he loved us so much. He like left his job and he wanted to come out and work here.
Wow.
So he worked in our tasting room a little, and Josh and I would always have these discussions about discounting because he would say, hey, I think that we could increase our 12 bottle member. So they would get 12 bottles 2 times a year by offering them 20% off. So they'll get 20% off, 4 tastings free every time they visit. And I never wanted to discount anything ever. Our wine club does do a 15% discount, and we do free tastings when people visit. But I see other wineries, let's say wineries that are considered mailing list only, maybe even more expensive and more premium. I'll just call out some in our area: Crown Point, Domaine de la Côte. People that are, I mean, they're driving the premium nature. It is a not a pleasure. It is a oh, Geoff, give me the word. To be a part of their wine club is like
A privilege.
a privilege. Thank you. It is a privilege to be a part of their wine club. Instead of us peddling discounts and saying, hey, you get Holus Bolus for $6 off a bottle. And sometimes I'm like, is that really what somebody needs? $6 off of a bottle? Does it make that big of a difference? I don't know, but I do feel like that by driving business with discounts, it just sets you up for failure later on. It says our wines are not worth what we've priced them at. And so that speaks to me a great deal. Now, we are 20 years into our wine club. Like, how are we going to back out 15%? But it might be worth it to move into what you're saying next is we don't offer a discount, but we do offer free shipping. Another thing Josh would say is, hey, if we offer free shipping to people who buy in the tasting room, they'll buy more. And I'm like, great, but we give 15 or 20% off depending on the club. And then we do free shipping on top of that. Like, I'm out of money at this point because shipping to the East Coast might be $60 for 6 bottles, you know? So talk about free shipping and how like just anecdotally, how you see those things coming together.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a few things there. The first is people disproportionately favor free shipping over discounts in a way that's illogical. So basically, it doesn't matter if you could like show them on paper, you're going to save more through a discount than through free shipping. They'll take free shipping,
That's
thanks to
amazing.
Amazon and all that. So I think the threshold, something like if you start to offer a discount above 20%, then people may take the discount over free shipping. But anything below 20%, the evidence shows they're going to take free shipping, whether it's to their value or not. So I think I'm kind of in line with what you're saying, which is I'd rather offer no discount and be very aggressive on free shipping. In part for another reason, which is a lot of wineries offer club discounts. So if I go to winery ABC, they're all offering 10 or 15%. It's not really a point of differentiation anymore. It's kind of like, well, this is what everyone does. It's not a great reason to join a club or to sell your club. Versus free shipping, I'm sure is probably similar in California to what it is up here now, which is the cost of shipping is insane, and people are really paring back what they were offering before. So if before it was free shipping on 6 bottles, now it's like 12 bottles or 24
Mhm.
bottles, which, who's buying 24 bottles at a time? We're talking about like probably like under 1% of people,
I
right?
was going to say
So,
it's not 1%. Yeah.
yeah. So like it's such a small market versus I'd rather offer no discount, be aggressive on shipping, and frankly, price shipping into my bottles. Like this is what drives me nuts is a lot of times you talk to wineries and they're like, and you kind of ask them, what's your sales mix? And it's like, oh, we're like 90% DTC. And then then the next question is, well, what's your shipping strategy? And it's like, oh, well, we just offer free shipping on 12 bottles or 24 bottles. And it's like, well, how can you be a winery that's focused on DTC and then not be aggressive on shipping? And more specifically, not price shipping into your bottle price. So we're pricing everything in. We price like our COGS include things like packaging, so many different things. And then we don't include shipping, even though we're a DTC winery. It doesn't make sense to me. So I'd really like a lot of wineries to reshift how they think about shipping and price it into their bottles so they can be much more aggressive.
And we looked at, so we just added $2 a bottle to every bottle, which would cover shipping. It's an extra like $36,000 a year. I mean, it's an insane amount of money. Like it entirely pays our rent and the tasting room plus a little bit more. So it's just something that we've been toying with. Do you have any thoughts? Like, let's say you're a winery and you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. I'd rather offer free shipping than discounts. But we do have a lot of customers that come in and do pickup, right? Because like in Santa Barbara County, let's say our local wine market is LA, and maybe half of our customers, LA, San Diego, Orange County, half of our customers or more are probably from Southern California, and they come and pick up. Do you have any, just like anecdotally, I know this wasn't part of your research, but any thoughts about like, do discounts tend to benefit people who pick up instead of ship?
Well, I think you'd have a couple of options. Like you could just, in some cases, wineries will just straight up offer a discount on pickup. So if you're going to pick up your order, you save 5% or 10%, whatever it is. I think that's intuitive for a lot of people because they're kind of like, well, of course, you're not paying the cost of shipping. Why wouldn't I get a discount on that? So I feel like in that case, there's more of a clear like cause and effect. Whereas like, I'm not discounting the product. You're getting this discount because we're not shipping it to you. So I don't feel like it jeopardizes like the brand position or anything like that. I mean, the other option would be, okay, instead of discounting, we just basically take that allocation of funds that we would have shipped and then we put that into like a pickup event or something. So kind of making that pickup event more of like a way to get people to the winery. And again, just to drive more sales would be the other kind of approach or strategy.
I love both of those. Okay, so we've talked about um well, okay, I want to just go back to something that you said about distance from the winery and engaging people that are not local or that really can't come visit, because there are people like we might have a wine club member in New York, for instance, and when they come into the tasting room, they're visiting, and I say, "Oh, you get your tastings comped, two to every time you visit." Well, that's not a benefit to them because they're never coming in. But if we want to engage people, let's say in New York, and you kind of mentioned something about like doing events in other cities. For small wineries, does it make sense? Would it make sense for like me and Peter to like leave Santa Barbara, fly to New York, get our wine club members together for a dinner, do something, spend thousands of dollars doing that? Is that something that is that kind of what you mean when you're talking about engaging people in other cities?
Yes, sure. Short answer is yes.
Okay, short
I mean,
answer.
but
Okay, I like that.
I think there's a few factors there. The first is obviously we're looking at some sort of minimum thresholds, whereas like obviously we need a certain number of members to make it worth our time. But part of it is we're thinking of it not just from a retention perspective. Like we could do like a scenario where it's kind of like, well, what would it cost if we didn't retain all these members in New
Right.
York City, for example? So you can kind of go with that argument. I think the other thing is, okay, yes, we want to retain our existing club members in, say, New York, but how do we grow our club members in New York as well? And so if you do, like, again, some sort of event in New York City where club members can invite friends and family, then it's a way to try to grow the club in market as well.
Love it. And
And I don't know, I'm not saying that's probably the right approach for all wineries. Obviously, if you're extremely small, it probably from a budget perspective doesn't make sense. then I would be thinking of how else am I engaging these out of market customers, club members, from shipment to shipment. So like how frequently am I emailing them? I already gave my rant to you when we were in Santa Rosa about the fact that a lot of times the only time wineries email their club members is basically telling them we're about to charge your credit card and hey, we just charged your credit card. Which isn't a great feeling. It's kind of like anytime they hear from us is something. It's not bad news because obviously they want the wine, but it's not really positive either. So thinking about how we can engage club members from shipment to shipment, and for I think a lot of wineries just don't value how much their customers want to hear from them. Because they think of hearing from a winery, it makes them think of their vacation. People like wine. It's not like hearing from Gap or anything like that. So nothing
Oh, that's
against
a good
Gap,
point.
but I think just saying like updates where we're not from the winery, where we're not like actively trying to sell them anything, just saying like, hey, this is basically what's happening with this wine that you'll get in your next shipment. So they can follow the process kind of from the vineyard through to the bottle, through to what's going to be in their club shipment, whether it's like 6 months, 8 months, whatever the case would be from now.
Yeah, we had hired a consultant during the pandemic to just talk us through a little. I mean, kind of what you do. We should have hired you, quite honestly. I didn't know that's what you did. But this was uh she was talking about push versus pull emails. So for instance, over the holidays, I wasn't trying to sell anything. I just sent something out to our email members like, these are the things that we love. I love this decaf coffee brand. I love this chocolate. I love something else. And it was just things we love. We weren't selling anything. I'm not sure, but I don't know if that's particularly like, I did get like 10 people, I mean, out of 3,000 wrote me back and were like, oh, that's so great. I love that coffee too. Or I can't wait to try those peanuts. But, and we didn't sell anything on that email. That wasn't the point. But are those the types of emails that you're talking about? Or do you feel like as a winery, you should always be pitching something at the end that's like, oh, also you can buy this if you want?
No, I think that's exactly the type of email, and it can be, I think that's a great example. It can be like, this is what's happening in the winery. This is what's happening in the vineyards. Ultimately, anytime, my inbox, I have something from Amy Christine MW, it's like, oh, I'm curious what you have to say
You can't
about
wait to open
probably,
it, Geoff. You're like, what is
yeah.
she going to say this time? She's so interesting and compelling. Can't wait to
Yeah,
read that
exactly.
email.
And probably all your club members feel the exact same way.
Yeah.
So, so I think it's like hearing about your perspective about really anything that's going on, whether it's wine related or not, frankly. But I think that provides value. I think a lot of wineries, they just don't email enough is problem number one. Problem number two is if they do email, it's just always sell, sell, sell. So it's not a balanced approach from an email marketing perspective. And then when they do sell, it's just kind of haphazard. My biggest pet peeve is wineries that have like a monthly newsletter. And I think it's just the worst approach. That's like a slight exaggeration, but I think it's the worst approach because it's kind of like, oh, everything we wanted to say over the last month, we throw it together into one newsletter. And it becomes like this like novel where it's like no one's going to read to the end. And the problem is in these newsletters, the sales pitch is normally at the end. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, we didn't
Yeah.
sell anything from this newsletter. It's like, well, it's at the very end. I didn't even read to the end. Um, so I think a lot of wineries could benefit from just more communication, tighter messaging. So basically one email, one message, make it super simple. So if you're trying to sell something, just sell something and don't bury it under a bunch of other updates.
Yeah. So if you're a winery that's listening to this and people are compelled by what you have to say, if and they're going to redesign, first of all they should hire you, redesign their wine club obviously, but is there if somebody wants to redesign a club, is it worth, would you feel like, let's just say Peter and I were like, hey, we don't want to offer a discount anymore, and we just say to people we're not going to offer a discount, is it worth losing members over that and trying to rebuild, or do you just feel like wineries have to be stuck in what their current situation is, what they're doing?
Well, I think there's two things. I think of it kind of like when you go to update your wine label, like that a lot of times the right approach is just like subtle improvements over time. So you're not just going from a wild shift from one direction to
Right.
another. And I think the club can be the same, where it's slowly evolving over time. Probably when it's something so significant like a discount, I would be hesitant to change that. I would probably do something where I would change the club for new members and then grandfather in my existing members. so that they keep their discount. Logistically, it just creates a little bit more admin work. But, at the end of the day, my philosophy always is you work so hard to get these club members. Why would you put yourself in a position where you're going to potentially increase the likelihood that they cancel? So I would probably try to accommodate what they have as their existing benefits.
But like one of the things your data showed, which I mean, quite honestly, shocked me, was that was it like 78% of people who sign up for Wine Club cancel after the first year?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, yeah, the short answer is yeah, but I think that could be for so many reasons. I think when you think of like the average tenure of a club member, it's longer than that. Like it's probably, on average somewhere between 24 to 27 months. I think when we think of why do people cancel in the first year, is probably an issue with how we structured the club, specifically from a benefits perspective, because we probably gave the wrong incentives. And so people joined for the wrong reasons, and then when the next club shipment comes up, they're like, "Well, I'm just going to cancel. This isn't what I want." So ultimately, it's about how we're selling the club. I think is important to make sure they go from the first year into the second year.
Yeah, because one of the things that I have told, I mean, I'm back in the tasting room now almost full time, but one of the things that I've been telling I had some people working there over the last 6 months, and I literally said, don't push the club. Like, don't tell people, hey, your tasting, just like what you said, your tastings are free if you join the club today. That's not the member that I want. It's not that we can't say, hey, we have a wine club if people are interested. Um, we have it on our tasting sheet. We've got like a tasting sheet, and then behind it, it's like join our club if you want. But I don't push the club actively, and maybe you'll tell me that's a bad thing, but I don't want to do it so people get their tastings for free that day. That sucks. That's not um we've actually not had we've people generally don't get their tastings and then immediately cancel. It does happen maybe within a year, like you said. So you do get a little benefit out of that, but it is a lot to add them into the system to then just have them cancel. It can be, I don't know. It's like a little laborious, the process of signing someone
Yeah.
up.
Well, and I would say it's probably a combination of factors. Ultimately, we want to pull people into the club, and there's a lot of easy ways in the tasting room to do that. So, using, like, for example, do you have club exclusive wines or club only wines?
Well, we're working on that this past year. Sometimes we just make so little wine of one that we do. So yeah, talk about the SKUs actually, because that's another big part of your research. So yeah, we do have some. We do every now and then we have a club only wine, but yeah, from the look on your face, we need more of those.
Well, I'm a big fan of club only wines for a couple of reasons. Because if you're a club member, it's like, oh, I feel special. But also, it's that carrot in the tasting room. Whereas, like, if you're pouring a club only wine, you're selling the club, even though you don't really have to say anything, right? Obviously,
Right.
there's a fine line where we can't just pour three club only wines because then people just get like rattled and upset. But if you have one in a tasting, I think it's impactful as a way to pull people into the club. Depending on what other benefits are, having those, like, I think a lot of wineries will have like a lounge space for members, things like that, where if there's like signage that indicates this is specifically a member benefit, again, that's the type of thing that pulls people into the club where they can see like, oh, this is the type of experience I can expect as a club member. Again, more challenging for a small winery, but I think those club exclusive SKUs make a big difference. And I think I always like to put it this way: for a lot of wineries, the club shipment for their customers is kind of like a sample pack, right? So you gave the example where we have three SKUs, two bottles per SKU. So it's still kind of like a sample pack where it's like if someone really likes one of the wines, they'd probably want to re up on that. Uh, but I think a lot of times where a lot of wineries don't maximize value is they just think of like the club shipment. It's like, okay, we get ready, we send out the club emails, then we pack it up and fulfill it. And then we're like, okay, we're done. Let's go to the beach type thing. But I think where there's real value is trying to maximize sales post club shipment. And so we're not just like going to rest on our laurels and say, there we go, we're done for the next half a year maybe. But how can we drive sales outside of the club shipments? And that could be, maybe that's where you offer a discount potentially. So if you reorder from a club shipment as a club member, that's when you get 10% off. Um, is a potential idea.
You were in your paper, you were saying that more SKUs equaled higher retention. Is that right?
That's
So
right. Yeah, that's right.
I mean,
I
can you
think
just,
part of it
uh,
to me
yeah.
feels intuitive because, it's, people aren't buying the wine they bought the way they did 20 years ago or 50 years ago. I think people like variety. They like trying a bunch of different things. And, the majority of people just don't have a cellar anymore. They don't have space. It's just not how they buy wine and drink wine. So I think people are more interested in trying a range of options versus like if you force people, like you need to take 6 bottles in a SKU. I think that's a pretty high barrier for a lot of people. And I think that would be a reason potentially to quit.
Well, one of the things we also didn't mention about your data is these were wineries that shipped 4 times a year. Is that correct?
There was a range, yeah. So some
Oh,
was,
there
I
was a
think,
range.
once a year. So that was the other thing my data showed is it seemed like the best outcomes were in that 3 to 4 shipments per year range, which is generally what I recommend to most people. Again, it depends on the portfolio and the number of SKUs and what makes sense. Part of the problem with like 1 shipment per year, again, if you intuitively think about it, is like that's 11 months that goes by where someone may not hear from the winery, and they may forget, like, why was I a part of this wine club? Like, why did I like these wines in the first place? So I think you need more touch points than that. That I guess the counter to that would be some wineries are like, oh, well, if we email them 4 times a year, that's 4 times they're more likely to quit because every time there's a club shipment, that's like
Yeah.
the impetus to quit. But I think it's a trade-off. Ultimately, someone's unlikely to be a club member forever, so that's going to happen at some point, realistically. So it's about maximizing value over the lifetime that they are a club member. So I think having something like 3 shipments a year, more touch points where people remember why I love the wines. This is why I'm a club member. It also gives you an opportunity to scale down because a lot of times wineries just view like canceling as like very binary versus, if someone wants to cancel and I'm someone who does 3 or 4 shipments a year, then I can say, well, is it an issue with you having too much wine? Because maybe we just bump you down and we just skip the shipment for you automatically. Things like that. So there's more of like a customer service angle versus if I'm 1 shipment a year, it's kind of like, well, yeah, you should probably just quit.
Yeah. I do. There are wineries here that we've thought of doing like 3 bottles 3 times a year instead of 6 bottles each twice a year. But then we're pulling 3 bottles out of the club. Also, it's just me and Peter. We don't have any help like for us. And I know there's a lot of wineries like this that have to use their own that don't farm out the packing up the wine club to someone else. And that it's a lot of work. It's like it takes as much work to pack up 3 bottles as it does 6 bottles. And so that's kind of why we've held it that way.
Just that you should
The
invite me. I'll fly down. And I love packing. I love packing orders. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
my favorite thing.
we'll give you a free plane ticket, down to California.
Yeah,
It's
no,
it's yeah.
I love packing orders.
Yeah, so everybody in Santa Barbara County who's hearing this now, Jeff will come and pack for free, your wine
Yeah, I
club.
will. Why not? So, yeah. I,
No,
I
I
put
do
some young on and then it's just fun.
nice. No, I do take a little pleasure in it. As I get older, just the tape gun, my, like, hand, my arthritis is acting up, Jeff. What are the things that we can't control as a winery? Because there are some things we can control. We can control what discounts, if people pay for shipping, how frequently we're in touch with people. Is there just something that you found that there's nothing that wineries can do about it, and that's where we should just let it go, if that makes sense? Like, okay, I'm just gonna say, I think some of the things in your paper were like the number of visits that people do. Like, we can't control how often people come to our tasting room, right? But I guess you can then control how often you're in touch. You can control engagement in another way. And then
Yeah.
passive customers. By passive customer, did you mean just someone who just doesn't engage back?
There's probably things that, on the face we can't control, but can still have an impact. So let's take your example of number of visits. Well, we ultimately can't control that, but we can sway it into our favor in terms of like, well, how frequently do we do events? What type of events do they attract people? If we think of why people are quitting their club right now, it's really for 2 primary reasons. It's health related. They're drinking less. We can't control that. Maybe that is something that's out of our control because I'm not advocating wineries go out and do low no necessarily. Um, I guess the other thing would be financial related.
Yeah.
And age would be the other thing, as people age out, is baby boomers age out. So again, can we control some of these things? Well, no. If we think of the financial element, do we want to provide club offerings that maybe are more affordable and will appeal to a younger generation? I think for so many wineries, they've just kind of rested on their laurels and thought, well, we still got baby boomers. Baby boomers are still spending money with us. We're not going to overhaul anything. But at the same time, then they haven't really thought about how they're engaging millennials as their next wine club cohort. So it's going to put them in a difficult position over the next like 5 or 10 years potentially, where they don't have an audience to come in that they haven't engaged up to this point. So that would be something I would be thinking about.
Well, like you said, the average age for a wine club member is 50. So that's Gen X, right? So boomers are what, in their 70s, 80s? So,
Well, 60, yeah, 65, yeah. Getting to
oh, a
that point
boomer
where
is
they were
65? Not a Gen Xer? Okay. All right. I don't know.
65, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think to your point, getting to the point where they're retiring, they're changing their spending habits because they're retired, and then they're changing their drinking habits because, well, they're old. So I don't know how to put it a nicer way, but I think that is having an impact. Obviously, again, it's very winery specific. But if you looked at a lot of wineries, they're probably heavily reliant on baby boomers still, in a way that maybe Gen X is like filling the gap, but I bet a lot aren't filling the gap with millennials in a way that they should be.
Yeah, I think that is 100% that is 100% true. Um,
Which I think is a shame for a couple of reasons. Because I think a lot of people have differing thoughts about millennials. I'm a millennial, I guess. But ultimately, if you look at what demographic is most likely to spend the most on a bottle of wine, it's millennials. Do they drink as much? No, but they still have a love for wine, and they also have a love for luxury experiential experiences. So, which is what we offer kind of in the wine industry. So we're like really well suited to, to meeting the millennial demographic where they are if we put some thought and effort into it.
that's great. I've one more question for you. There is a practice here, and you probably have seen this in a lot of places, in California anyway, or maybe just the West Coast. When people sign up for wine clubs, sometimes there's a little asterisk at the bottom that says, you have to take a minimum of 2 or 3 shipments, and if you don't take those, then we charge you $50, $50. Basically it's a penalty. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it kind of is two-sided. So the first is what happens in a lot of cases when someone signs up in a tasting room for their wine club is maybe they find themselves in an awkward position where they're between club shipments. So it could be like a long time before they actually hear from you again. So, I think part of the reason why people have these penalties is they're offering things like welcome gifts. So basically like, welcome to the club, here's a set of glasses, or welcome to the club, here's a bottle of wine, things along those lines. So if you're someone who's waiting for the next club shipment, you're not potentially waiting, 4 or 5 months to hear from the winery. It's like, here's a tangible benefit of being a club member. I mean, you could also do that not through welcome gifts, but through, an onboarding kind of wine club automation email flow. So basically saying welcome to the club, another email could be like, here are the benefits that you can avail of as a club member. Basically, so someone's not just going home and being like, did I join that club or not? Because I haven't heard from them. And then I think the cancellation fees are kind of just covering our costs so that we're not out if someone decides, you know what, I changed my mind. Um, Probably, my personal thought is I'm not opposed to having them like listed on the website, but I would probably never charge them unless I thought someone like, was very egregious in terms of taking advantage of the club. I just don't think I would charge them. And it's, at the end of the day, it's probably $50. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I do think those people that are so, I mean, we've seen it a few times where people come and taste and they join the club, and then a month later they'll say, "Oh, we've had a health problem," or, "Oh, our finances have changed," and they cancel before they ever get a shipment. But it is so rare that is one of those things that we just, you eat it, you just kind of chalk it up to the cost of doing business. I don't think that there's, but there are some wineries that are around. We are in Los Olivos that are really stringent about that, and I don't blame them. They have big clubs, they have club managers, they have people to pay that do this. And so, that kind of makes sense. It's just something that we haven't done. I just wanted your professional opinion. Um, this was awesome. Is there something that we didn't touch on that you want to touch on?
Well, the one thing that we should probably touch on is user choice models and customization.
Oh,
So
you
for
have to make
example,
that. Yes. Explain what that is.
Yeah, so I think if we think of a traditional wine club from like 20 years ago, like when I was just starting in the wine industry, I think it was a traditional club was basically like, we're going to ship you this much wine. So it could be, 3 shipments a year, and this is what we're shipping you. You have no say in the matter. And a lot of times, wineries would sure, maybe they'd send new releases, and then maybe they'd also send wines that they have a lot of inventory of. And that's really shifted over the last like 10 years, where people are moving to a user choice model where you as the winery set a default shipment that people can just accept and take that, or they can customize their shipments. So if I'm someone who, I don't know, hates Syrah for some reason, which would be insane, but
Yeah, what,
hypothetically, let's say,
don't say such things. Don't put that out into the
okay, let's
world.
take the example
Mm.
of Riesling, because I don't think you do a Riesling.
You don't think I like
Do you?
Riesling? Oh, we don't. No,
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 you
we don't
don't
make
make a
Riesling.
Riesling.
No, no.
Yeah, so let's take the example of Riesling because Riesling is a bit of a tough sell. So, I'm someone who I hate Riesling, and then what happened before is, well, the shipment included Riesling, and so why are you shipping something to someone who doesn't want it? A big incentive to then quit because it's like, oh, I don't want another Riesling. So then people move to a user choice model, which Commerce 7 facilitates, where it's like, if I hate Riesling, I'm going to swap it out with something else. And this is really beneficial both from a retention perspective, again, because we're making sure customers get the wines they want, but really also from driving value. So a lot of times you talk to wineries about pivoting to a user choice model, and they're like, oh, well, people will just trade down to the cheapest wines because people are cheap. Well, in actual fact, like the data shows it's the opposite. And this, I see this every single time for every winery I work with. If they have a user choice model, they're adding something between 10 to 20% in value because people are trading up. They're trading up because they're buying more expensive wine, or they're trading up because they're adding more wines to their shipments. And part of that's how you structure the club too. So if you're someone who's charging a flat rate shipping for 6 bottles, well, maybe you're saying, okay, if you top up to 12 bottles, it's free all of a sudden. So there's a driver for club members to top up. Um, and I think, again, it kind of shows that we underestimate our club members. We underestimate how much they love being a club member and how much they're willing to spend on our wine too. So I think moving to a user choice model would be like my number one recommendation for anyone who's not already doing that.
Yeah, that's what we absolutely shipments are fully customizable. But what we find is, well, when we run wine club, we might lose, let's say we have 500 members. Last year, the last shipment, we lost maybe 25 members, but like 30 people paused or skipped
Skipped,
their
yep.
shipment. But what ends up happening is, because it's customizable, a lot of people didn't trade out bottles; they just added, because this is not a plug for Commerce 7, but they are not a sponsor of this show, but they're welcome to be. We have no sponsors, obviously, because we have 4 listeners. But the Commerce 7 has made it so easy for people to create an account and to go in and to move things around. And so I think even though people are canceling, we don't find that our average when we're running the shipment that we're missing those members. I mean, of course we would love to have them, but people do trade up. I think you're right. I mean, this is all anecdotal, but they absolutely add to their shipments. So we've noticed that. I don't think I've
Yeah,
ever done a podcast that's been as informative as this one. Usually we're just talking about Riesling or something, which I'm going to do
we could
next
do
week
that
with Graham.
too.
We're going to talk Riesling with Graham Tatomer next Tuesday
Oh,
of
that's
Tatomer
awesome.
Wines. Yeah, he makes he studied in Austria under Emmy Knoll, and we're going to talk Riesling and Gruner and all those things. But Geoff, you just have to give a plug for yourself. And I am going to send this out to the DTC managers meeting too, but I should have all your info because I think everyone should hire you.
Well, thank you. Apparently, you're a
Geoff
better
Moss, give your
salesperson.
company name again. You have a website people can.
I do, I do. Yeah, I'm the worst salesperson on the planet. But I
You
guess
help other people sell, but you don't sell yourself.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
great. Perfect.
That should be like on my tombstone probably.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I run a small marketing agency called Lithica Wine Marketing. If you want to learn more, it's the website's lithica.wine. That's
And
it,
that's
I
it.
guess.
Okay. Thanks, Geoff.